Dipty's here as well. Brexit, of course, the word of the day in the papers. I think it's probably going to be the word of the week. News of a Tory MP leaving the Leave campaign.
It's on the Times newspaper front page this morning. They're reporting it. Saida Warsi, she's a former co-chair of the Conservative Party. She's leaving the Leave campaign over what she calls xenophobia and hate ideas. And this is, of course, linked to a poster that was published by Nigel Farage, the UKIP, far-right UKIP party leader, last week. But it's not the first time she's resigned in protest. In fact, in 2014, she quit the government over its stance on the Gaza conflict.
And a lot of the Sunday papers also took a big stance over the weekend, deciding which way they were going to tell people to vote. It's
sort of been a lead-up. A lot of the papers have been doing this in recent weeks in favour of Britain staying in the European Union. Staying in Europe is The Observer, the Guardian's newspaper on Sunday, and the Sunday edition of the Daily Mail, which said, I quote, "It's not the time to risk peace and prosperity." Now, supporting a Brexit, most not surprisingly, Rupert Murdoch's papers, including the Sunday Times, which argues that, I quote again, "the EU doesn't protect Britain," quote, "it is NATO that guarantees our security." Weirdly, though, the weekday edition of the Times actually is backing Britain to stay.
It's very confusing, isn't it? The Wall Street Journal is looking at Europe post-Brexit in case Britain does vote to leave.
Well, according to the journal, European officials are sort of scrambling to organise emergency meetings if the vote does go in favour of a Brexit this Thursday, mainly to contain contagion. Now, the New York Times says EU countries actually warning Britain that it will pay the price for leaving the Union. Basically, the EU does not want a situation where we have this sort of long, drawn-out period of ambiguity. They say either Britain is in and it stays in, or it leaves and it leaves Europe definitively. Now, if that's the case, there will be a swift reaction from the EU, mainly to sort of ensure that Britain does not negotiate its future trade agreements, but as a non-member, they don't want to create a situation where there's this sort of EU membership à la carte where they can pick and choose.
And The Guardian is also looking at this possible contagion and saying, actually, it could be far bigger than anyone's predicted.
Stuart, we spoke earlier about the Frexit, the French exit. Now there's possibly a question, it's a long shot, but there is a question of a Texit, which is a Texas exit. The Texan nationalist movement is actually looking at the Brexit vote with a lot of interest. That's according to The Guardian, who interviewed the president of the TNM. The president says, fundamentally, arguments for a Brexit are very much identical to the Texan to a future Texan movement. But if you replace Britain with Texas, EU with the US, Brussels with Washington, it all ends up being the same thing.
Let's move to Italy, shall we? Calm things down a bit. But the press there reacting to the damning local election results for the Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. This at the hands of the Eurosceptic five-star movement.
Damning results indeed for Matteo Renzi, the Prime Minister, and many of the newspapers actually sounding the alarm bells, if you like, for him and his party. They really have seen they were looking at the local elections as a litmus test for him. An eviction notice, that's what Il Giornale is saying on their front page, while Il Mattino is saying it's a defeat beyond doubt. It's a Naples-based daily that says that Renzi, for the first time, must now draw on the vocabulary of losers, I quote. While the conservative paper Corriere della Sera says it will be hard to minimize what happened in the impact from these local elections. But they do say it's not just Renzi's fault. They blame also the entire government that says they've had this sort of lack of unity and credibility that it seems has lost favour with Italian voters.
And indeed, Rome, of course, has also elected its first female mayor, Virginia Raggi, she's called, from that five-star movement. Got quite a few challenges ahead of her, though, hasn't she?
The Guardian actually has outlined some of those challenges. For instance, public corruption scandals. Rome has been sort of rocked by several public corruption scandals in recent months, but also cracking down on the Vatican's alleged unpaid taxes. This is something that Virginia Raggi actually evoked as part of her election promises. But one of her biggest challenges could be navigating the sort of tricky waters of being a woman in what is quite a macho Italian political environment. And to her credit, she sort of played down her femininity, but she has spoken in favor of family issues. She's a mother herself. She's spoken out in favor of family issues like childcare and so forth.
And we're going to end with something different. Wall Street Journal's piece on Iceland football fans.
So Iceland, as we know, is in its first Euro Cup this year. It's a very big deal for the small country, and some 8,000 fans are in France to support their team. In fact, it's the largest congregation of Icelandic fans for a singular event. So it's not just sports, for any kind of event. Another fact, Cristiano Ronaldo has actually scored more goals in his career than the entire Icelandic football team in its history. That's according to the Wall Street Journal as well. And it turns out that football fever has sort of taken over the country. One fan, the journal reports that one fan is actually trying to track down Bikir Bjarnason, who actually scored the goal against Portugal. They used to date in middle school, and she's keen on reigniting that relationship. Her current boyfriend says, I quote, "He understands it perfectly. They have to be together."
Oh, how sweet. What a lovely story to end the press review. Come on, Iceland. Hopefully they'll go far in Euro 2016. You never know. Dipti, thanks very much, Dipti and Stephen on France 24.